Welcome back to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach. And man, Joe, tonight, the breach is where we're going, okay? Because first, you got Pierre Poilievre, who you know a lot more about than I do, but the more I see him, the more I hear him. I'll tell you what, Joe, not knowing his positions on everything, I'd be like, I'd vote for that guy. You want to know why? Because he's smart and he knows how to speak. And he knows how to throw the nonsense that the media and everybody else tries to throw at him. He knows how to throw it back. See, that's why I like that guy, because he's got some stones.
He's also media savvy. Like with his clips on Twitter, he gets it. 2 minutes, like he's very savvy.
Yeah, and he's got that dry sense of humor too. Like when a reporter says, a lot of people say, he goes, which people? Like he'll stop and go.
He's like Baby Boss.
Who says that?
He looks like Baby Boss. That's who I used to call him.
But you got him. Then we're going to talk about Mike Johnson, who, look, I might have a couple of issues with Mike Johnson as the Speaker of the House. But nonetheless, we're going to talk about what his response to the Senate Republicans caving on immigration is.
He makes me itch.
Who's that? Oh, the Senate Republicans?
No, just Mike Johnson. I don't trust him. But I have my thoughts on that. We'll go.
All right, we'll explore that a little bit. And then you got the scariest guy in the world, as far as I'm concerned. Oh no. second scariest guy, Klaus Schwab, because the first scariest guy in the world is his little underling, Yuval Harari. And you've heard us mention him on the show in the past. So
you ever watch like Star Wars where like Jabba the Hutt has like that guy on a chain, like that little like troll?
It's That's Yuval Harari. And Jabba the Hutt, if you look closely at Jabba the Hutt's face, he looks like George Soros.
Yes, that's the crew.
That's the crew. Hey, listen, Milton would have called them the horrid crew, which is a whole other story. So here's the thing: if you're watching us here, we're all over social media: for Rumble, Real Truth News, Frontline with Joe and Joe, Frontline TV, wherever you're seeing us across social media. Please help us out. Hit a like button, hit a subscribe, hit a share. That's if you like what we do. If you're watching us, I assume you kind of like what we do. So please do that. So Joe, we got a little red meat for our Canadian friends right here. So talking about Pierre Poilievre. See, in this clip, and then we're going to come back and talk about it. This is why I like this guy. Guys, watch this.
The opposition.
The Prime Minister's Arrive scam is now flailing out of control. Today, revelations from a Joël Denis Bellevance that one Arrive scan company received $250 million in contracts. Let's get this straight. It's a company with 4 employees, headquartered in the basement of a tiny cottage. They got IT contracts, even though they admit they do no IT work. $250 million. WTF.
Here, here. I'm going to ask, we are dangerously close to crossing the line in terms of what is considered parliamentary language. I'm going to ask the honourable opposition leader, please, to withdraw that comment and to use parliamentary language, please.
Where's the funds?
Now, you're not supposed to love that guy? You're going to try to tell me that if you're just a middle of the road person, you don't absolutely love that response? Because you see what they try to do, Joe, and then I'm going to throw it over to you. I don't care what anybody says when they say, well, both sides do it. No, they don't. No, they don't. Not the way the left does it. Pierre Poilievre saying WTF, you're going to compare that to some of the crap that the leftists in the Canadian Parliament say, or the Democrats in our House of Representatives. Dick Durbin, the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, he called some of the Republicans questioning one of the nominees racist. And then when questioned on it, he was like, he kind of like was backpedaling a little bit. But my whole point is this: all civility has gone out the window in Canada and in America because of the left. I don't care about both sides do it. No, they don't. Not like you people. You people are the definition of incivility. And Pierre Poilievre, listen, man, a more American politicians would be like, he looked right at him and he said, "Where's the funds?" Guess what, Joe? I guess his statement's not coming down.
Well, here's the deal. Well, where are the funds and what are they going to do about it? You see, this is where, like, we listen to these guys, it's like theater, but nothing happens. Nothing happens. Like, people, listen, if you and I and two other people, he said there's 4 people in that business, squandered government money, what would happen to us?
Forget
Go
it.
to jail. We go to jail.
No, unless it was 4 people that got that money from Joe Biden, Barack Obama, or in this case, Justin Trudeau.
We go, but this is the thing. There's no accountability of the nonsense that goes on with this. Dude, it's a circus.
But the circus is run by the circus leader,
100%.
which is, I guess, their equivalent of the Speaker of the House. I don't know if they call him the Speaker of the House. The circus is run by him, rather than waiting for the liars on the other side to try to address that. With Justin Trudeau, let's face it, when he's backed into a corner, he's a rabid dog. I mean that, he's a rabid dog. DOG. He attacks people for asking legitimate questions like that. But the circus leader found it more important to want to govern Pierre Poilievre's speech. That's what I'm appalled by. Joe, you know as well as I do, that $250 million, that's floating somewhere in a Swiss bank.
Oh, it's just misappropriated.
Right.
I mean, that's going on with the Ukraine right now, too. I don't even want to know what's going on with all that money. All our money. What a waste. What a waste. Because it's not going to the people.
No.
It's very sad. There is such a disconnect between the establishment that runs everything, government, companies, and people. My wife and I were talking about this at dinner, and it's all over the world. That's why you're seeing populist movements, even in places like Argentina, which are not exactly known for having sound government. I mean, people and the people that quote unquote supposedly run the show, dude, there's just a disconnect. The conversations are like regular people are like, what are you talking about?
But Joe, the disconnection is that they're not, you could say that they're not listening to people. They don't want your opinion, Joe.
But I agree. And that's why there's a problem. I'll be truthful with you, Joe. I want a second American Revolution. I'm being dead serious. I actually would love. I don't trust the Republicans either.
Well, how can you trust them? Nikki Haley and the rest of them, they want to send that $65 billion.
I would love to see. Basically, things have to change. They have to change. People have to get power back, and they're not going to give it back.
No, there's one way, and I don't care what YouTube does to us. There's one way that would really blow the lid off a lot of this is federal election reform in America. Meaning the federal government, because it's a federal issue, it's not just a state issue. The federal government has to demand, number one, set the rules, say no more mail-in ballots. You have to purge every single voter roll in the United States. That includes Newark, New Jersey, and Essex County. That includes Cook County, Illinois. That includes Los Angeles County, California. Your rolls have to be purged. No more dead people voting. And as you said before, you show up with ID, paper ballots. If you do that, you know what you're going to find out? I've said this many times at the front line with Joe and Joe. When DeSantis did this in Florida, you know what we found out? Florida ain't so blue.
He won by 20 points.
What's that?
The first time he won, it was like 10,000 votes. The second time, after he basically straightened out the elections, he won by 20%.
And Broward and Miami-Dade County both went for Trump.
And here's the thing. Historically speaking, Florida was always up for grabs, Joe.
But that's my point. I'm sorry, Joe, to cut you off. I'm sorry, but you just made my point for me. Because there was no election reform for those numbers of years. There was because dead people do vote, and because there was always shenanigans going on. And you know that, Joe. We're from Essex County, New Jersey. We know the same thing happens there. We know the same thing happens in Cook County. You got some old Irish gangsters from Chicago that died 100 years ago that are still voting in Chicago. That's my larger point, is that Miami was, Florida was considered purple-ish or whatever because nobody was paying attention to the elections. Well, I think that the law of unintended consequences, I think the left is going to get, there's going to be some sort of action, I believe. And then we will be able to take some power back in this country, Joe, because I'm sorry, I've told you this before. I don't think California is as blue as they tell you it is. And I don't think New York is as blue as they tell you it is. And the same with the thing with New Jersey. You know why? Because even Democrats don't vote for insanity. Some do. Some do. All right. But a lot of Democrats, they just, I just believe that they look at the agenda of their party and they're like, what the? You know what they do, Joe? They go, WTF. They go, WTF.
Well, the thing is, the problem is everyone who controls all the institutions of power, they're not. Listen, you're right. If that ever happened, and that's why it doesn't happen, because you see, people, before that happens, and this is my opinion, more people, their eyes have to be open. Too many people buy into the system like it's legit. It's not legit, Joe. It's not legit. The system doesn't work for regular people, and they buy into it as if it's real.
Right.
That's why people watch those pundits. They think it's real. It's not real. It's run by the ruling class. And a lot of eyes have been opened, though, in the last 4 years. They showed their cards. They pushed the boundaries with COVID well beyond the reasonable lie that you can get away with.
Right.
And I'll tell you what, more eyes have to be open. And when enough people, if you lose right now, I'd say there's at least 30% of Americans that don't believe in the system anymore. I don't believe in the system anymore. It doesn't work because it's not about people anymore. It simply isn't. If you get that up to, say, 70% of America, 70% are basically like, the press is in the bag, the government is in the bag, the government has to put fences like they did with Joe Biden around the Congress to basically keep the people that supposedly you serve away from the leaders because they hate them. You get about 70% of America like that, then you may see fundamental change because they'll have to do it. Because frankly, they'll fear for their life. That's what will happen. And that's why they want to take guns away from people.
Listen, that goes without saying. Obviously, Trudeau, he's all in favor of that. The Democrat Party, they just, the thing is, what galls me more than anything is when they think we're stupid and they use their media allies to try to convince other people that we're stupid. This is not about hunting, Rosie O'Donnell. This is about two things. Number one, I have the right to defend myself and my family if I'm being attacked. Ergo, I need a gun. Okay? Catch that? A gun. The other thing is that when our government turns into a tyrannical government, which if it's not already, it's awfully close, and some agent comes through my door, bangs down my door to take my son away from me because I'm teaching him that abortion is wrong and marriage is between one man and one woman, that yes, I could defend myself against that Gestapo agent of the state. Now, people don't want to hear this. And the new tactic is like Bernie Sanders and Dick Durbin asking Republicans, well, do you think that people should be able to shoot at federal agents? If they're jackbooted federal agents that Joe Biden's going to use to take away my fundamental rights, then I think a lot of Americans, Joe, might turn around and say, yeah, you come into my house to impose
that
this
would
on
be
me.
a losing proposition. I think what they're more afraid of is this scenario. I'll set the stage. They want to get rid of guns because if, say, any coup, historically speaking, in the last 100 years had to do with a general. If you looked at coups in South America, you looked at coups, you look at Spain, Franco, you look at Pinochet, you look at Argentina, it's always a general. So I'll set the stage. The Joint Chiefs of Staff come together and they basically say this general is going to be the next president. Whoever the president is, because the country's out of control, basically says, because they're in charge of the army, you're leaving the White House either in a body bag or you're walking out. I am now the president. And the people join in with the army.
Right.
Because they have guns too. So basically, now your army quadruples in size because you have whatever number in the army, and the people who also have guns join the army with the saying that it's now our government, you're out. That's what they're afraid of. It has nothing to do with school shootings. That's just, now that is tragic.
Of course.
Don't get me wrong. But that is absolutely not why they want to get guns away from people. It's that scenario I just set up. You have the army, you have to have the army, and the people join together like a good swath of people who also have guns, and then the government, it's a coup.
Well, you mentioned Pinochet, you mentioned Franco. Let's say Franco. I mean, they were in the middle of a civil war. You have Franco, and then fighting against the communists. As far as Pinochet is concerned, yeah, Joe, the General Pinochet took over the government. Okay, you could say that, but there's no question about it. But the people were on his side. The people are not of Chile. They were not communist. The
But
media
that's the
would
scenario they're afraid of.
What's that?
That's exactly the scenario that's why they want to disarm people. Because in such a situation, like I said, a general, you get a good swath. Keep in mind, the police are not on the side of the government. Did you see there was a shooting in New York City, maybe about a year ago, a young cop during this Bragg DA, tenure.
Right.
There was, like, no exaggeration, like 100,000 cops in front of St. Patrick's Cathedral. Like 100,000. Maybe not 100,000. A ton. They're not black, Hispanic, Asian, white. They're not on the side of the government. And they have guns. I will guarantee you the rank and file military, they're not on the side of this nonsense. All it would take, I'm telling you right now, it's just a general. And if that was to happen, and then to your point, the people, then it's over. But the problem is with stuff like that, who's to say that person's going to be any better? Because that's what happens when you start getting into that cycle of craziness.
Listen, I understand when you say, like, what would make them better. Joe, anything is better than the insanity that's being imposed on us. And we're going to talk about Klaus Schwab and what the WEF types, they want to impose on us. Of course, he's got all sorts of comrades here. In the United States, people like John Kerry and others who think that we're all stupid because we don't believe in climate change. I think it's all a hoax. I think all of it, Joe, all of it is a hoax. I don't believe one word of their nonsense because they've been saying the world's going to end for the last 100 years. And every time it doesn't end, Al Gore says, well, that's because well, we've actually reduced some emissions. They'll take credit for the world not ending that they said was going to end. Do you see the pretzel logic in these people? But Joe, they have control. We're going to talk about that. But let's talk about another problem. So, Joe, set the stage. So you had a bunch of Senate Republicans. They voted with the Democrats, right? For Biden's, what did he even call it? Foreign aid bill, which included, I don't know what, however many billions of dollars for Ukraine, I assume, and basically to keep the border open. And people like Langford voted for it. You have of course you have the normal horrid crew, Susan Collins, Murkowski, and all these people. And well, look, Mike Johnson, okay, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, here's what he had to say. Watch this clip, everybody.
Regarding the border, talk about the American people not being listened to. They are crying out to the Biden administration to secure the border. This is not a Republican issue. It's an issue for every single person, and everybody knows it. We know the stories of children being poisoned by fentanyl and cities being overwhelmed by migrant surges. We know House Republicans have shown that we are listening to and holding the administration accountable for this catastrophe. We're listening to the people. We're taking action to hold Biden accountable. Last night, the House voted to approve articles of impeachment against Secretary Mayorkas. Desperate times call for desperate measures. We had to do that. He has abdicated his responsibility, he's breached the public trust, and he's disregarded the laws Congress has passed. But much more has to be done, of course, to secure the border. And what the Senate produced this week is silent on that issue. Senator McConnell and I have spoken about this in frank sessions, and let me be clear here again this morning. The Republican-led House will not be jammed or forced into passing a foreign aid bill that was opposed by most Republican senators and does nothing to secure our own border. It's time for Washington to start showing some love to Americans. On Valentine's Day, this is a good day to point this out. You need to listen to the
Yeah, so show some love to the Americans. How about you not let all sorts of people, and Joe, let's face it, we know what they're doing at the border, and it's the same thing that's going on in Europe, okay? Not only do they want political power, now it's to the point where the Democrats are active. See, they call January 6th an insurrection. This is a real problem that causes real violence, okay? Because the people who are coming across the border deliberately are being brought here to create chaos. Because remember, the government gains power when there's civil unrest, when there's chaos. And like I said, go look at what's going on in Europe. Joe, they go on buses, these Muslim migrants, they go on buses. There's a video, and you watch these videos, and you say, you know, this stuff isn't made up. Somebody actually has caught this on camera. They threw a pregnant woman, a pregnant French woman, off a bus. She landed on her head on the concrete on the sidewalk, and they just went on. And nobody does a damn thing about it. And that's the same thing the Democrat Party's doing. That's the same thing those 14 Republicans just did by voting with the Democrats. I'm not the biggest fan of Mike Johnson, Joe Resinello, but I'll tell you this. Thank God he's going to stop this bill.
Dude, I'll give you that, but I would have hit him in the face with a cabbage. That honestly, it's bullcrap. What, you're going to do this now after 6 million people came in illegally? It's just theater. You're gonna impeach Mayorkas now. He's been lying.
It's never going to happen.
It's pure bullcrap. And we're going to listen to the people. You're going to listen to them now. You should have been listening to them the whole time. Go away. Like all of them, they're all full of crap. I've had it. It's nothing but nonsense. I would have hit him directly with a rotten cabbage and said, "Sit down. I've had it." Langford, the quote-unquote conservative, he probably got bought out. They said, we'll give you something in what's it called? In Oklahoma. So, and he's like, fine, I'll do it. That is the perfect example of how hypocritical and how much nonsense these people are. I can't listen to any of them. None of them. They're all useless.
And somebody like Langford, I wouldn't have thought in a million years he would go for something like this.
Dude, I guarantee you it was a backroom deal. And they probably said, what do you need in Oklahoma? What do you need? And we'll give it to you in the bill. Pork. That's why they're useless.
See, that's why, I mean, I know that a lot of people know what I'm about to say here at the front line with Joe and Joe. That's why we need term limits. Term limits need to be imposed on Congress and the Senate the same way it's imposed
I agree,
on the House.
But there's a lot of things. Like there's term limits, but I'm telling you, we have to get all money out of government. They'll never do that. You see, that would require a revolution because then they're really turning over the power to the people. And what I mean by that is basically when you have lobbies, if people knew the history of America, when we founded our country, there were people who did not want the populace to be able to vote. That was actually a voiced conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And there is still people who have those ideas because they say that they don't know what they need or they don't know what's best for them. And to some degree, they're right. I hate to say it. Democracy works, but at the same time, there are tons of people who vote for things they don't even realize what they're doing because they're not educated.
But that's go ahead.
That's part of democracy. However, what we have is an oligarchy. And what they did was they baked in a layer of lobbies. And they baked that in super PACs. So basically what that is, it neutralizes the vote of the masses. So basically, you have to throw the people a crumb. It's like fishing. You have to throw them a lure. They nibble at it, and then you got them. And then you do what you want. And that's why the disconnect is so deep. That's why people look at like the news and they're said, really? This is what this bill's about? Because it has nothing to do with you. It has
Right.
everything to do with the people who really control the government. To really have change, all money has to be taken out, whereby your vote, Joe Pasillo, is just as good as Jamie Dimon's vote. My vote is just as good as the teachers union. One vote. You're only allowed, just like based on a social security number, $100 to give, whether it's the tax ID for the teachers union or my tax ID. And then you neutralize the institutions. Now we're talking a government of the people. That would never happen. The Republicans would vote it down. The Democrats would vote it down. The only way that would happen is you had them by their neck up against the wall. And as they were urinating in their pants, that you were going to throw them off of a bridge.
No, you could say pissing at the front line with Joe.
I'm just saying,
Throw it
that's
out
the
there.
only way that that would happen. And then we would have a country that has truly the voice of the people, by the people, and for the people, because they don't represent us. The Republicans don't represent us, and neither do the Democrats. And enough people have to see that. People are starting to see it. I'll tell you right now, even Barack Obama alluded to that in his Stanford speech. When people, he said it. There was a lot of projection in that speech, but I invite people to Google it. He spoke there maybe about a year and a half ago. He said, when people lose confidence in the government, they have no faith, the game's over. He's right. And a lot of people
Yeah,
don't.
I think you used the right word though. That was him projecting
No,
because he's the
but
one who
correct, because
installed a
he's
lot of
doing
that.
it. But
Right.
at the same time, a lot of people, and it's not just MAGA Republicans, they don't have faith in the government anymore.
Right.
They simply don't. And frankly, it's stuff like what you just explained, Langford.
Well, that's why. But Joe, I'm sorry to cut you off. But that's why I know a lot of people don't want to hear this out there. All right, but you're going to hear it anyway here at the front line with Joe and Joe. By the way, share this video, please. Help us out. You're slacking a little bit out there. You're slacking. You gotta share Joe and Joe videos. You gotta hit the like button. Joe, that's why sometimes we need a good dose. I know a lot of people don't like this. A good dose of Catholic teaching. One of the things that the Catholic Church teaches is subsidiarity. Okay. Another word for that in the American political parlance is federalism. Okay. We have a federalist system. If I want trust in my government, you know what government I'm going to trust? My local government, because they have to be attentive to me because I live around the corner from them.
Well,
Do you know what I'm trying to say?
They know what's best. People on the ground, I'll use an example. Your local school board in Alaska knows better than the government in DC what's best for those kids because they see it. That's
Right.
what subsidiarity as an example if people don't know what it is.
Well, the problems are best solved. Most problems in society are best solved at a local level.
Absolutely. But Reagan said that the best government is less government. That was a famous Reagan line. But again, power is never given away. Power is taken. They took ground during COVID away from people. They did it by basically changing our election model. Mail-in ballots shouldn't exist, guys. Sorry. There's no reason for them. Look me in the face and explain to me why you still have them, why there's a need for them.
If you could get in your car and you could drive around the corner to go to a liquor store to buy a fifth of scotch, you could get in your car on election day and go down there
Absolutely.
and go and vote.
So the point is, they took power away. There has to be a shift, just like what happened in New York City. The police in New York City, mostly due to 9/11, it was almost like a small army. The New York City police force was arguably the greatest force in America. That's why New York got cleaned up. It was like a wrecking machine. They stripped $1 billion out of the budget, so they gave up ground.
Right.
You have to take that ground back. They're not going to give it back. You have to take it. It's the same thing. America has to take back power, the people. And enough people have to frankly see it. They have to say, listen, this doesn't work for me anymore. You can call yourself, listen, I say this, there are definitely fundamental differences. I get it, between Democrats and Republicans. And we could debate those differences. But what people don't get yet enough is you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, you're in the middle class. Well, they don't represent you. They don't have your interest involved. They don't have your kids' interest. They don't have your economic interests. And many of these people are embracing globalist agendas because the people who give them money, the corporations, the super PACs, are all globalists. So they have to represent them. All they have to do to me is lie to me
Right.
so I can give them my stupid vote. But they have to do what they say because they give them money.
Right.
And enough people who get into the debates have to stop it and basically say, you know something? You can't eat. I can't pay my bills. I can't put gas in my car. A Big Mac Happy Meal costs $17. These guys don't represent us. And then we just got to turn around and look them in the face. When enough people do that, game over.
Right.
And that's what I want to do.
Well,
That's
I'll tell you
my
something.
goal, is to wake people up to that they don't represent you. They don't represent you.
Well, the thing is this, and people have been talking about this for a couple of decades, right? You know what? Probably as it is right now, two things are going to happen. One is I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. That's the way it's looking right now. If he's on the ballot and he gets the Republican nomination, if it's not stolen from him by the Republican Party, the same way the Democrats stole the nomination from Bernie Sanders, who would have won that nomination, by the way, or at least given Hillary a run for her money. They had to rig that. Okay, they rigged it for Biden. Biden was toast, and then James Clyburn resurrected him in South Carolina, and the machine went to work. Okay, if the Republicans don't take away the one candidate that the vast majority of Republicans want to vote for, all right, I'm going to vote for him, number one. And the first thing I hope he does is what you just said. I hope he takes a wrecking ball to the whole thing, because I don't think the guy fears death, to be honest with you. I know you've said it, and I happen to agree with you. They're going to try to kill him in some way. I don't think the man fears death. I really, in my heart of hearts, believe that as a billionaire and as somebody who said openly, I took advantage of the tax system. I did everything within my legal means to not pay as much taxes, blah, 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 all that stuff, right? I really believe he's on our side. I really do.
Well, he's more on our side than the rest of them. I mean, he's far from perfect too. The debt is out of control. He contributed to that.
Right. He didn't do anything about that.
I mean, and that's a bad thing, a very bad thing. But I'm talking about a radical shift in how our government works, giving power back to the people.
But that's my point. You don't think that, let's just say that Donald Trump says, you know what, we give $100 billion a year to the Department of Education. We're abolishing that. We're going to save that $100 billion because all the states have their own department. I'm using that as an example. Every state has a Department of Education. So why do we need the federal?
No, I agree. I mean, Vivek
like
made
that,
a lot of those claims.
Things like that, Joe, will go. My point is that will encourage people if people saw something like that.
I hear you. The problem is there's still 40% at least. You see, this is where like strong-armed revolution doesn't work, because there's still 40% of the people, their hearts aren't in it. You see, that's why we have to change from the bottom up, from the top down. I mean, I'm going to vote for Donald Trump too, but I mean, it's a Band-Aid, because sadly there's another lunatic like Barack Obama coming up.
Right.
Or like could be Gavin Newsom, some other crazy person that's going to continue this horrible agenda that has destroyed regular people, white people, black people, Hispanic people, Asian people, regular people. The price of everything went up, and it's not the corporations. The corporations took advantage of it. They're not innocent either, but they didn't start it. It was supply chain issues, and you printed money you didn't have. You gave away ridiculous amounts of money during COVID, which was completely ridiculous and a waste of time.
Right.
And that's why things cost more money. And I'll be truthful with you. People have to see it. And again, when enough people do, it'll strike fear in them.
Well, a little healthy dose of fear, Joe Resinello, I think will go a very long way. And I'll tell you something, I don't fear a lot. I fear God. Okay, I do. And I say that sincerely. And everybody knows what we mean by that when we say fear God. And there's a few human beings that I fear, not because of necessarily what they might do to me, but what they might do if they had the opportunity to the next generation, your kids, my son. All right, and that's what scares me, is what they're going to be in for. Well, here's one of the scariest dudes on the planet. And Joe, you say people need to wake up. People need to wake up to this guy. Here's Klaus Schwab, everybody. Just listen to this.
Think of the power of the combination of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and big data. So it's a combination of the different technologies which really bring the fundamental change. And finally, I think we have to be prepared for a world where we see a fusion of our physical, our digital, and our biological dimensions. So it will be a world integrating the physical, biological, and the digital dimensions. So it will be a new world. And
gee, thanks, Klaus. It'll be a new world. People have been saying that, Joe, 20 years ago when you said New World Order, they said you're a conspiracy nut. Now they just come right out and say it. And what he's talking about there, Joe, is transhumanism. That's a scary idea, dude. Not just for Catholics, not just for Christians, not just for those who have an authentic belief in God. That's scary for everybody. They literally want to make, I don't know, what would you call them? What would you call somebody whose brain is half wired and half biological? That's what he's talking about. But what happens if you are wired? Guess what they do, Joe? They turn you into a slave. That's what it is. I mean, they're already doing that without the transhumanism. That would just be the cherry on the sundae.
Well, to be honest, what he's talking about is the future. Obviously, there's going to have to be some reform around it, but you're going to create a slave class, because that, if you ask me, I was talking to my wife about, I think it's the mark of the beast. I'm not putting.
I agree with you.
I think that's the mark of the beast, and I'm not putting a chip in my body, because I'm just not. But what you're going to do is, if you opt not to, you can't compete. You're going to basically go into a cave, because you're not going to be able to compete.
Right.
If they could accelerate through, I'll just use a simple thing. I've used this, I did a clip on it. A cutting and pasting mechanism in your head, where the chip allows you to have perfect memory, just like cutting and pasting, of everything you've ever read perfectly, forever, in your head. You could just spit it out. Dude, you're so far ahead of, say, a person that doesn't have that. They can't compete in any field. So what that does is it creates a slave class. Ultimately, though, my $2 opinion, I think God wipes us out before that happens. That's just my 2 cents.
Well, listen, if you are talking about, Joe, I've said this before, and I'm sorry, I absolutely agree with this. Okay, there's no question about it that when you look at the language in the book of Revelation, okay, now this is not gonna become a religious sermon. But if you look at the language in regards to what you mentioned about the mark of the beast, it's scary language, because number one, they have the mark of the beast, I believe, either in their forehead or their finger. Okay, that's number one. We're seeing that now. You just described the one in your head, and now you got the digital one where people just go like this. They just put their finger on the thing in the supermarket. It says, "You're paid. Go ahead," because all your information is on a chip. That's number one. The scary part is that in Scripture, and John wrote Revelation, John says, nothing to be bought or sold except through him. That speaks to what you just said. Forget about being behind, Joe. You're not going to be able to eat. In other words, you remember something. These people, these New World Order types, one of their central tenets is population reduction. They want to reduce, and I mean significantly. There's what, 8 billion people in the world? These people really, they've said this. They want less than 1 billion people.
See, you know what it is? Someone could be listening to you. They say that's crazy. No, they actually say that.
No, they killed 1 billion children in the womb since 1973 worldwide.
And what's it called? Eugenics is still going on. Why do you think they want to control populations in Africa, in India, and in Asia? That is very real. Why do you think that they want to control populations in inner cities? Why are abortion clinics only in Black and Latino neighborhoods? 70 to 80% of Planned Parenthood clinics are there. Why aren't they in upper middle class white neighborhoods? Why? Tell me that. Oh, they need them. What do you mean they need them? Why? Why are you making it so accessible for poor people to abort their children? The upper middle class or the rich, they're okay. They can have kids. We're good with that. Those kids are good. That's going on here in America in plain sight.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, people. This is the beauty of social media. People have to open their eyes to things. They just don't. They believe the lie. You know, we had Gracie, Dr. Gracie Christie, went to Columbia. She's on the DeSantis's education board. Highly educated woman, sees the world as it is. She said that. She said, "We're lied to." Her exact words: "We live in an empire of lies. We're fed lies." And she is at the upper echelon of education. Her husband is a lawyer and a doctor. She's a doctor. She went to an Ivy League school. And she's like, "We're lied to." And we are. And this is the problem. People buy it. They buy the lie hook, line, and sinker. Poor people, middle class people, rich people. They buy the lie. And by the way, it destroys them.
Right.
It destroys them personally. It destroys their families. It destroys their children because then they buy the lie. They get into bad marriages. They do all sorts of things. They've normalized vice, and it destroys them, both on this earth and in the next life. But we'll just talk about this life because the proof is in the pudding. And this is the lie. And it's not just me. She said it. We live in an empire of lies. People accept things. Things that are completely abnormal are normalized. You have to buck that trend. You want to talk about a revolution? That's the revolution.
Right.
Eyes of people have to be opened to the reality of that.
You know who's
I'm
going to
not
help?
doing it anymore.
You know who's going to help open our eyes? I mean, I wish it was the church, Joe. I wish
The
the
church,
USC.
you see, listen, you know, I'll tell you what, though. The church always had problems. I get it. I know what you're saying. But even if, and there are good clerics and there are good priests, I know them, people don't listen to them. What opens people's eyes, and this is getting into the religious aspect of it, is confession and daily prayer and living a sacramental life. You don't have to be educated to do that. And when you do that, literally and figuratively, you see. And that Gracie, Dr. Gracie Christie, she's a devout Catholic. And she went to Columbia. She sees. You see,
Right.
that's where people start to see. And they know things for what it is.
But Joe, you have to. But here's where I was going with that. But I think a lot of what. See, remember something when you're talking about our enemies, and they've made us their enemies. A lot of it is projection. Okay, everything with them is projection. So what they accuse the other side of doing, they do. They control the means of communication worldwide. And the reason why I said, I mean, a lot of people need to have their eyes open, but a lot of times it's because they're not getting the information. Now that's why I brought up, let's say, for argument's sake, I only mentioned, it wasn't my driving point. I only mentioned the USCCB, but take them as an example. We have an historical example of when the bishops in America spoke clearly, and they joined with Protestants and others to stop Hollywood from producing films. There were certain lines Hollywood couldn't cross. It was called the production code. When they spoke with a strong voice and the people knew about it, okay, the people knew the position of the church, okay, They had to cave. Hollywood had to cave, and they had to follow the production code if they wanted to make movies. And they, by the way, I will say, they made their best movies before the production code. Even though I love a lot of movies afterwards, they made their best movies before the production code. But my point was, it would be nice if you had that from the USCCB. But the
I would
one
agree.
person, but real quick, the one person who I think is helping more than anybody to at least Joe Resinello help get people the information where they'll have a choice whether or not to open their eyes is Elon Musk.
Here's yes, the open platform of X is a good thing. Would we like to see a more unified, say, Christian coalition? Yes. But would people really listen? There's some that would. You see, you have to fertilize the field before you give the seed. I would like to see a stronger voice. I agree with you wholeheartedly. But frankly, I don't know how receptive people are. If Jesus Christ walked in to many of our churches across the board, would he even be welcome? Would he? Today was a very strong message. If you went to Mass, it said, pick up your cross and follow me. What good is it if you gain the whole world and lose your soul? You just lost 70% of America right there, Joe.
Right.
Catholics included.
No, I know. I'm
So
not.
I'm just saying, like, the way to see is to change your own view of the world. People aren't willing to do that. They don't want the answers. It's like they don't want them. And that's what has to change. That begins with families. And that's why I think it's going to get far worse before it gets better. Because ultimately, I think what's going to happen is, and we talk, you and I with our show, we're blessed to talk to a lot of different people. As the culture continues to go dark, and it's going that way, 40% of children are born out of wedlock. 55% of families break up. What do you think you're going to have? You're going to have a lot of wounded people. As that continues, that trend, we just talked to Rusty Reno. He's the senior editor of First Things. He's like, you can't have a society with that. He's right. 100% agreed. As the society continues to unwind wounded people, people are going to eventually come to a point, they're going to be like, this doesn't work.
Right.
And they're going to see people. And that's why, if you ask me, what people need to see is, if you ask me, is they have to see radical, Christ-like living. And that could only be done through sacramental living and prayer, because that you can't do that on your own. You can't self-manufacture it. People have to see for themselves when they wake up in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. and say, damn, my marriage sucks. My kids are a wreck. My life is out of control. I have vices. I'm addicted to pornography. I smoke weed constantly. I drink too much. I gamble. My life is out of control. But that guy across the street, who's no different than me, why is that working for him? Why does it seem that he's happy? And the answer to that is simple. It's not that guy. It's who he invited into his life, Christ. Because Christ is real and God is reality, and the sacraments work, even in a church that has screwed up prelates. The sacraments are valid.
Right.
If people took that seriously, and little by little, you will see a change. And then the world changes. But you're not going to strong arm it. It's not going to be top down, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. And here's the thing. If you choose to do that life, it doesn't mean you're better than anyone else. You just made a better choice. It's like anybody who, say, is an alcoholic. They come to the end of themselves. They say, I'm not going to drink anymore.
Right.
I'm not going to drink anymore. I can't do this because I'm going to die. So what do? They admit. We just interviewed that gentleman. What's his face?
Joe McGivney.
Great conversation. Look it up on our show. You come to the end of yourself.
Right.
You say, I can't do this anymore. And then you rebuild from the ground up. That's what happens to happen in America.
Yeah.
And I personally think eventually that will happen. But that requires people to live radically. Radically. People have to see it. Because I'm going to tell you right now, the leaders, they're all full of crap. That guy, Mike Johnson, I'm hitting him directly in the face with a cabbage. Why?
No, wait. Rotten cabbage. You said
Right in
rotten.
the face. You're going to tell me now, after 6 million people, we have to do something? Sit back down.
Yeah.
Sit back down. Langford, go back to Oklahoma. I don't want to hear it. It doesn't
Yeah.
work anymore. The government does not represent you. People have to figure that out for themselves.
Hey, listen,
Democrat,
Joe,
Republican.
or else they're in for a very rude awakening. I want to give a couple of shout outs at the front line with Joe and Joe. Some new guests or some new visitors to the chat room. Rizard is in there. Teresa made a good point. She said, I think Tucker Carlson is
I think
helping
he
to
is.
open eyes too. He is. He absolutely is, Teresa. No question about it. I think Elon Musk with a multi-billion-dollar company in X could really help that along. But you're absolutely correct. So Teresa's with us. Deborah's with us. We also have Mari, Akeem, a few others in there. There's a bunch of you. Three Strikes. Dara. Hi, Dara. Susan, Anna, Laura, and just basically TM, Norm. We just want to thank everybody for stopping by and joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. If you like what we do, I mean, these are our lively conversations, whether we have guests on the show, and you can see all those interviews that we do. And they're all on our page, or a live show. We go live every Thursday at 9 a.m. Natalie, a lot of love to you, babe. She says love from Ontario. A lot of love to you, Natalie. If you like what we do, share the videos. Share them. Doesn't hurt. It takes 2 seconds. You share it on Facebook, share it on YouTube, share it on Rumble, share it on Twitter. You comment a lot, like them. And this way we get more of these conversations out there. All right. So we want to thank you very much, Joe. Great conversation tonight, as always. And remember, till the next time, everybody, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon.